Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Moments. Moments of Solace.
Yes, welcome back. So today's topic is near and dear to my heart because it is about a couple people asked us about like what is it like raising kids in the U.S. like as like Pakistanis or whatever, and to me that topic is near and dear because I'm born and raised American, right? And I remember growing up, and you and I used to have like a joking beef about this, right? But like growing up, everybody was like, "Oh, you're like not Pakistani enough," right? Like you're not Pakistani enough. Everybody assumes you're morally corrupt.
ABCD.
Yeah, ABCD, right? But like you're like morally corrupt. You're you don't believe, like you're not Muslim enough. Like everything that people sort of use to define as Muslims is like you're just not enough of it because you're American. Born or raised, and given that I'm both, that topic is near and dear to my heart. So I will let you start on this one because I can rant forever. But okay. You go.
So for me, so you are like American born, Daisy, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to use the term, but it's true, right?
Yeah, no,
but for me, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. Then I moved to Pakistan. I went to school in Pakistan. I came to the U.S. and like all of that, right? So for me, I wasn't American enough.
Yeah.
Right. So you were too American. You weren't Desi enough.
But the question is like, what is it for you, right? The experience of like now raising Pakistanis in America, right? That experience.
It's hard. It's definitely hard, right? Because compared to you, I think I'm doing a phenomenal job about Pakistani there.
Yeah.
I say this because I went to school in Pakistan. I learned how to write Urdu. Mm-hmm. I learned how to, speak Urdu and write Urdu, and then same with Arabic. I don't speak Arabic, but I can write Arabic, right? Mm-hmm. So with that being said, when Elise is at that age where we have to teach her those things, I'm really excited and confident that I will be able to do that. Uh-huh. Now, if you talk about like, I'm just gonna stop talking. You go.
I don't know where you're going with it. Because the thing is like I'm the only one who spoke to her strictly in Urdu for 2 years of her life. First 2 years of Elise's life, right, I spoke to her strictly in Urdu.
Yes, but that was also because we always argue about whose Urdu is Urdu, right?
I don't argue with you about it. You argue with me, and then you realize that you're speaking Punjabi and I'm speaking Urdu.
Because your Urdu is like the accent is very American to me. Uh-huh. So it's like, okay, fine, you're talking in Urdu, but it's Americanized Urdu to me.
Yeah. But I guess like do you realize then what it's like for somebody like me who's born and raised here, right?
No.
Like you are already doing that to our own kids. Because what I'll say, because look, right? Because like so, there's two things that I remember, really three, because I remember it for Urdu as well. But there was like you're not Muslim, right? Okay. Which I remember everybody assumes that. Like, oh, like you're American born and raised, you're not Muslim. And it's like, no, I am. I'm very devout, right? Like, a lot of people probably assume that we're not because like we don't preach about it and we don't talk about it. We don't like write prayers and du'as and all of our stuff, right? But like we're actually quite devout. And then the other is like you're just not Pakistani enough, right? And or like morally and all that stuff. And I remember like a lot of people don't realize that like our parents, when they move here, their version of Pakistan is frozen when they moved, right? Mm-hmm. So like my parents moved here in 1980, right? 80 and then 83, my dad and my mom. Like my dad's version of Pakistan is 1980, right? So like the morals I was raised with were 1980s Pakistani morals, right? So I would actually, quite frankly, I would argue that morally, I'm more Pakistani than most other Pakistani-raised Pakistanis.
Sure.
Right? Because, like, no, like, the notion of, like, partying, drugs, alcohol, like, none of that was ever an idea for us, right? Like, you didn't lay down in front of your elders. You didn't speak to anybody that wasn't in Urdu. We never raised our voice, really with anybody, but let alone our elders, right? Like, all of those sort of like traditional things were things that we were raised with, right? But then I see a lot of people move from Pakistan who, like, they're the opposite.
Yeah, you said it yourself, right? The time has changed.
Yeah.
So from when you were taught what you were taught from as a Pakistani, that time has changed, right? Like when I grew up in Pakistan, like I think it also makes a difference where you grow up in Pakistan. And I think like that's an important part of it, right? I grew up in Punjab. My dad's side of the family's from Lahore. My mom lived in Multan, so like right. And the other thing is like we're Arai and we like lived on village, like lived in villages and like we're pretty close to it even after we moved. And I still have family who lives in our village and stuff like that. So when I went back to Pakistan, I'm like kind of resuming where I left off, right? No, it's
so you think, but yeah, go ahead.
but that's what it is, right? Like, so like I grew up around like things that were taught in that area, right?
Mm-hmm.
For us, it was like, yeah, obviously you don't talk, back to your elders. You don't like all of, like some of the things that you've done, right? Like you were taught, but we weren't as strict in terms of like you can't lie down and like when other people are around or things like that. Like there's some informal things on our side of the town.
Yeah.
Right. And I could be wrong, right? Like, but that's just how I was raised in Punjab. Now, when you and I talk about raising kids here in the U.S., we have our differences because where we both grew up.
Yeah.
You grew up here, you were taught by your parents the wrong and rights of our Pakistani culture and all of that, right? I grew up in two different places and I moved to the U.S. and I was taught based off of like the areas that we've lived in. Mm-hmm. So Saudi, we weren't allowed to go outside without a mahram. So that was it, right? Like I was homeschooled. I went to a private school. I've gone to a boarding. Like I've done all of those things. Mm-hmm. And come to Pakistan, I went to St. Mary Convent High School. And that was like a different environment. Then I went to a public Pakistani school that was also very different. Like you go from not being outside to being outside and then going to a school now where you have, like it's like you have boys and girls in school, right? 3 different places to be. And in all of those 3 things, like 3 places, I learned so many different things. Mm-hmm. So now when we moved to the U.S., my parents weren't strict about the environmental change or environment, like, but they did have their restrictions.
Yeah.
See on the back, they had the restrictions. Obviously, don't do drugs, don't drink alcohol, don't eat pork. Yes, we're not going to the masjid to pray 5 times a day, but pray 5 times a day in the house if you're able. Fast if you're able. And those were like the things that I grew up with. Their main thing was like, we're here for an American dream. And that American dream was the education, getting a good job. And everything else was just like, we'll figure it out as we go.
Yep.
So I have that mentality when we raise our kids. Because I'm like, we'll figure it out one step at a time once we get there. Whereas you guys had more of a structure, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying, that right, is that like like people assume that somebody who grows up in the US, mm-hmm. right, born and raised in the US as a Pakistani, is like not Pakistani, right? Which is like, and again, you're sort of already alluding to that for our own daughters, right? That like you will already assume that they are not Pakistani enough based on what you're saying, right? And that was, I remember, because and look, no hiding anything, right? Like post 9/11, the last thing I wanted to be was Pakistani, right? I did anything and everything I could to not be Pakistani, but like our family structure sort of like just hammered it in, right? Like again, we didn't speak anything but Urdu in the house. And mind you, like, I got made fun of for my Urdu a lot when I was young, so I just didn't talk a ton.
Yeah.
When I was around family, I just sort of just stayed quiet because people just made fun of my Urdu. Grew up and found out that my Urdu is actually quite good. To all the people out there. But that, like, how we treat our elders, right? That was, again, sort of hammered into us. Everybody sat up. You didn't sit next to, like, your wife. Again, like, I don't agree with all of it, right? I don't agree with all of it, and there's a lot of those things and those norms in my family that you and I have broken.
Yeah.
Right. But, like, I'm just like, to me, what I'm saying is that, like, when people talk about, like, oh, how is it raising a child in America as a Pakistani, I'm like it's just it's the decision of the morals you choose to teach to your child. And I don't think that should have any bearing. Like, of course, like, they're never going to be able to say, like, I know what it's like to live in Karachi or in Lahore or Multan, of course, right? Like, and inshallah, we'll take them back and get to, help them experience it in ways that even we never got to.
Yeah.
Right. But, like, yeah, like, when I saw that question, I had, like, because I had put on Instagram, like, like, what's some topics, and, like, I saw that question like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, oh, you people. And, like, I get it. Like, I understand why a lot of people ask this question, right? Because you're raising kids in a foreign land, in structures and like, I'm blanking on the word, but facilities and all, like a world that you don't understand, that's not like yours, right? Like, obviously here, not everybody's Pakistani. People sort of pick and choose their own moral standings and the direction of whatever they want to go in. And I think that's good, right? I think that diversity of thought is extremely important. Whereas in Pakistan, right, there's a different diversity of thought. Like, everybody there's Pakistani. There's sort of a uniform moral code, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't think it's any different. I think if you choose to raise your child as a Pakistani, right? Like, I think the language is extremely important. I'm trying to get back to speaking to Eliza in Urdu, which has been hard ever since she started school. And also after she got sick, I sort of, like, snapped back to English when we were in the ER, because it's my first language, I think, in English. But yeah, I mean, that's what I told you. I can rant on this topic.
So this topic was more so for Nabil, and
you can go.
This is the end of our podcast.
Take care of
it was really nice chatting with you guys.
Yeah, no, I told you I could rant on this topic, but, like, I like,
But that's what I understand what you're saying, but I'm also saying that it's just as difficult on the other side.
What's the other side?
The other side of, like, coming from overseas and being in the U.S.
Yeah, but, like,
having
nobody's questioning that.
But they do question that.
No, but I'm saying, like, what we're talking about right now is, like, truly, like, what is the challenges of raising a Pakistani in the U.S.?
But I'm telling you, it's when people from overseas move to Pakistan, and we are now in charge of raising our kids as Pakistani, we're essentially fobs, right? We are like Bandu, and we're teaching our kids things that they, like, we're making them too Pakistani.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Like, for, like, when you guys moved from Saudi to Pakistan, like, that's how you were perceived?
When we moved from Pakistan to the U.S., we were fresh off the boat. Yeah. We were, like, we didn't know how to dress. We didn't know how to speak. And I went to an English school, so I knew English. Yep. But it just wasn't English on an English standard here in the U.S. It was just British taught British English.
Yeah. The wrong English.
By default, you get put in ESOL, so there's that, right? So you're too brown. You're not brown enough. Yep. Right? And then with being too brown is that you're teaching the expectation, or not the expectation, but assumption is that you're going to teach your kids the too brown ways. Like, essentially, you're teaching them how to be a Bandu. And I say that because derogatory term, because people use that term
Yeah.
to describe people that come from Pakistan. Like you're paying to like, you're teaching your kid to like. When I first moved here, I was going to school eating like Pakistani food. My mom would pack me lunch. She would pack me like anda and paratha, and like I was like dope. Like I get to eat. Like you know what I mean? I was eating like khichdi in a jar, and like people would roast me so much.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, your backpack smells like onions."
Yeah.
And now I you know how like I'm so like I can't smell like cooking. I'm like, Nabil, I smell like masala right now.
Yeah.
Like that comes from that. People would like talk about stuff like that, and then it would be like, oh, when you read your books, like you're too, like also in school, we had to like memorize things, right? Like learning the concept of things wasn't a thing when I grew up. It was like you memorize everything from start to finish, and that's exactly how you would read and write, and that's exactly what the exam was about. It wasn't about like whether you learned a concept or not.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, when I moved to the U.S., it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Right, and even now, because you can see it on my Instagram and the way the brand is, right? I'm wearing a lot of Pakistani kapde. Like we created those English meets Urdu books.
Yep.
We speak to Elise in Urdu. There's a lot of things that we do are too brown for some people or too brown for some families.
Yep.
And when people talk to me, sometimes I receive messages like, oh, you live in the U.S., learn the American ways.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why do I have to learn the American ways? Like, I'm Pakistani. Like, I guess I'm Pakistani American, but like, I don't have to learn the American ways for my child to thrive in America.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's an interesting. So that's
does that like that? Do you
I get what you're saying.
understand?
Yeah, like
where
it's
I'm coming
it's
from.
the immigrant experience of raising a Pakistani versus like an American experience of raising a Pakistani.
Exactly.
Right.
Sorry, I'm like.
Which I had not considered. I mean, but I do find that comment funny. Like learn the American way because it's almost as if people think that they can't coexist.
That too, but there isn't really an American way. I think people don't understand that.
Well,
what
I mean,
is
like,
an American way?
Hyper individualism. Sort of.
America is built off of so many cultures.
No, I mean,
so many
I agree.
cultures and so many languages. There isn't just one American way.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm getting some riled up now.
I know, right? I thought this was near and dear to my heart,
but but it is true. Like, what is the American way? Like eating hot dogs and
shooting guns.
Well, you know what I mean?
Hot dogs and guns.
Like, I don't want to knock on our privilege. Like, alhamdulillah, we've been blessed with privileges here in the U.S. and being a product of immigrant myself, I'm so grateful for the life that I have lived in the U.S. But at the same time, it is so frustrating to hear that even though that you are trying so hard and working so hard to be an American, a Pakistani American, you somehow are not enough.
Yeah. Well, honestly though, as somebody who's born and raised here, I got that.
Yeah.
You're Pakistani American. You're not American. You're born here, raised here, spent your entire life here, paid all your taxes here, everything.
Yeah. And the criticism will also come from your own people.
Yeah, well, it comes from everybody when you're born here, but
I'm talking
it definitely
about
comes. No, but that's actually exactly what I'm saying, right? Is that somebody who was born and raised here, I was criticized constantly.
Yeah.
For not being Pakistani enough. Which is obviously the opposite of what you got, but it was no matter what we did, it wasn't enough.
And even with being a Muslim, right? That's another topic to even I don't want to touch on all of that. That's just another whole episode of let me not even. But when I say inshallah and mashallah and subhanallah and I say, these phrases in my post or in my Instagram stories, for some reason the internet loses its shit. You know what I mean? And I'm just but I am Muslim. Just because I'm not your type of Muslim, doesn't mean that I am not Muslim.
And that's the thing, that statement alone is going to get so much because people are there's only one way to be Muslim, and it's no, actually there's not, right?
But I have learned that people who truly are in touch with their religion and understand it for what it is, and are happy with with their relationship with Allah, they are more receptive of other people being different in the way they practice.
Yeah, and the thing is, like,
but those that are not comfortable in their own like, you know, their own like way of living and their own way of loving their religion will always have something to criticize other people
like,
on.
it's
and
this like weird
so
thing
I
of,
don't
like,
even want to like touch on that, like that, like I just,
now that we've already sort of started digging for it.
I know, but whatever.
Yeah.
You know, say what you need to, but doesn't change the fact that.
Yeah. No,
whatever.
for sure, I agree.
Is,
Sorry. I was gonna say, like, it actually it reminds me of Nyla's brand, The Other.
oh yeah.
Right? Which,
her entire brand is built on.
yeah, like being othered, right? And again, there's so many different forms of it. We talk about it. Obviously, like, Nyla's mixed. She has her experience. We think about that with my own niece who's mixed, and the experiences she'll have of, like, you know, she's American raised and mixed. So, like, God forbid her wanting to be Pakistani, right? Or Muslim, and everybody's gonna look at her as if she's like a revert or whatever.
She's gonna have to like prove herself to be
constantly, yeah.
And we talk about that in our own family.
Yeah, and
like,
we talk about it, but like,
yeah, but it's just
like I remember when we went to
she's gonna have to work
Pakistan.
extra hard to be Pakistani.
Yeah, but I remember when we went to Pakistan, so many people, like when we went as tourists, and, you know, we went on the Bedad travel thing and all that stuff, and like so many people like were like you're like, you were born in America? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, you're like, we didn't expect this from somebody who's like born and raised in America. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like the way I treated my mother and the other elders on the tour, or like the way I spoke Urdu and all that stuff, right? It was just so like weird to me, because I'm just like, what did you expect? Like, what did you think I was gonna do? Just show up with like a bottle of beer and like a bong or something and just be mean to everybody? Like, what did you think was gonna happen?
But you know, I will say another thing.
And no offense to those people. Sorry, I just want to say, like, I get it, right? I'm not trying to like poo on these people, right? I'm like, I get it, right? But like, I just want people to sort of consider, like,
poo on these people.
Poo on these people, yeah.
What are you? The lazy?
Yeah.
Are you a lazy? I don't want to poo.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm trying to already stop.
But I will say, just adding on to what you're saying. I'm not taking away from your experience and what you were saying, but you know when people say no offense
but is right before they offend you.
Exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
But you know, when we went back, I got the complete opposite, right? It was like, you know, you live in America and you're coming back, and you're like, when we got there the first night, I was like, I have to eat golgappe from the cart. Mm-hmm. They were like, no, we'll take you to a nice restaurant. I'm like, I don't want it from a restaurant. Yeah. I want it from the cart. And they were just like, no, you're going to get sick. And I was like, if I get sick, I get sick. But I'm here for the, like, I grew up around this. This is what I'm
here for the stomach virus. That's
like, but I want
thrive
it, right?
on the stomach bug.
But to them, it was like a shock. It's like, but you live in America. Like, you don't, and I'm like, but I grew up in Pakistan. Like, I know.
Yeah. So then you got sort of the same thing as me. It's just that, like,
yeah, it was just like, but yeah, so it's like, I guess it depends on how long you've been here, and then like whether you were born here. So like from being in the US, I am too brown, I'm too desi, and then when I go to Pakistan, I'm too American, and I don't know anything about Pakistan.
Yeah. So
I'm just like, where are we? Where do we belong?
You really don't. You spent your life in Multan. And like,
if my Multanis are watching this, please
I'm not knocking Multan.
Please feel free to come at my husband.
I had seen Lahore, Islamabad, and Karachi at the very least before we got married.
Yeah, and you know how much you said, like, oh, Karachi is top tier. And once we got to Karachi, Karachi had trash piles everywhere.
Oh God, man.
This was my first time going to Karachi.
Look, what happened to Karachi is not my fault. How was I supposed to know they would turn it into a landfill?
So, just going on a...
Man, I apologize, Karachi people. My dad's from Karachi. My dad's entire family's from Karachi, but fix it.
Anyways, so I had never been to Karachi. So the first time I go to Karachi is obviously with Nabil. And Nabil, up till like we get there, he's been talking it up. He's like, Karachi this, Karachi that, best food, super clean. You know, and he's just like...
I didn't say it was the best food.
You said it was... the best food. You talked about the biryani, like just everything.
I didn't talk about the biryani.
You did.
No.
Sir, I remember this as if it was yesterday. I don't forget things that
You
hurt
do.
my soul. Okay. So
You forget everything around what hurt your soul. Just like that tiny little moment.
So then we get to Karachi. There's literally trash piles everywhere. And I was so shook. I was like, what has happened? You know, like my initial reaction, like, what has happened to Pakistan? But and on top of that, it was like, oh my God, like, Nabil, this is not the Karachi you had painted in my head.
You could have Googled it. You should.
Anyways, and now I'm like upset. Like, I'm really concerned. I'm like, we're about to go to Lahore. What is he gonna think of Lahore? But you know what?
They did Lahore up.
Lahore was top tier.
Yeah.
They made me so proud to take him on a
Yeah.
tour. Like, the streets were clean. People were driving, like, actually following directions. Like, it was amazing. And I was like, Nabil, next time we come, you know where we're going to be. We're going to go to Lahore, and then we can think about Karachi.
I know. Ishtiaq Bhai, if you're watching this, we do fully intend, inshallah, to come one day.
Ishtiaq Bhai is not my dad. It's
he is
just
not.
a person we met in Pakistan.
He was, we fully intend to take that 1 week driven tour with you. We'll just have 2 more passengers with us. No, remember, Ishtiaq Bhai's going to take us through Punjab.
Yeah, we want to do Punjab and we want to do Skardu. So that's like our
So Bedar, we're coming back for Skardu at some point. And Ishtiaq Bhai, we're going to inshallah come back and do Punjab.
Yeah. So I am ready
car.
for him to see the drive through Punjab. And I also want him to go to Multan. I know people talk so much smack about Multanis, but like the kind of culture and food that is in Multan, like it is, there's like Saimal, there's so much in between. Like, I cannot wait for you to see. Anyways, with that being said, we'll see you next time.
Stop being so judgmental.
I'm sorry.
Not you. Well, actually, yes, you too. You, man.